Welcome to our monthly pensions series. In these episodes, we cover different topics each month, providing an overview of the issues faced by pension industry practitioners and offering some practical insights.
Hi, I'm Beth Brown and I'm counsel in the pensions group at Mayor Brown. Today, as a special treat, I'm joined by my colleague.
Hi Beth, I am Jessica Walker and I am a partner in our restructuring group.
The aim of this podcast is to provide practical advice for pension scheme trustees when it comes to dealing with COVID-19. We will discuss some of the key considerations that trustees should be aware of in responding to the crisis, including the day-to-day running of schemes, communication with scheme members, scheme investments, and thinking about the potential impact on sponsoring employers.
So to start with, although the full impact of COVID-19 is still unknown, we do know that the impact will be significant because it already is. And both the virus and the policies aimed at containing it are having a significant economic impact on both individuals and businesses. And the consequences of these recent events can already be seen in the pension sphere, with a number of large employers entering into insolvency processes or facing distress in the public domain. The pensions regulator has responded by issuing various statements and have said that they expect trustees to have appropriate monitoring and contingency planning in place and to be alive to risks that would have consequences for their scheme and members. So in other words, trustees are expected to know what's going on and address any risks that arise quickly and effectively. Let's take a look at what the risks could be. To start off, Beth is going to talk about maintaining the status quo in running pension schemes.
Self-isolation and home working on the scale that we see now is completely unprecedented for this generation. Trustees should consider their own arrangements and operations and take steps to ensure that the scheme continues to operate on a business as usual basis to the extent that it can. It is likely that pragmatic changes to operations are required in order to achieve this under the current circumstances. With that in mind, some steps for the trustees to address, if they haven't done so already, include 1. Checking the scheme's governing documentation to make sure that trustee meetings can be held via conference calls and meetings can be signed electronically. 2. Working with third-party advisors and service providers to continue to support the day-to-day running of the scheme, such as operating the scheme payroll remotely, prioritising pensioner payments, and prioritising the processing of retirement and bereavements, as well as communicating and working with members electronically wherever possible. 3. Considering the impact of the current situation on scheme funding and taking appropriate advice on this. 4. Analysing the status of service providers and outsourcers used by the scheme and seeking legal advice about potential options in the event of the insolvency of an existing supplier. And finally, reviewing insurance policies in order to ensure that they cover all potential eventualities that could arise in the current circumstances. Jessica is now going to talk about COVID-19 from the perspective of the scheme members because, understandably, this is a very worrying time for scheme members.
Absolutely, Beth. It is a really worrying time for members on a number of levels. Not only might they be concerned about the human impact, but many will also be concerned about the impact that the situation will have on their personal finances, including their pensions pot. And from a pensions perspective, the state of the financial markets and, in particular, a perceived or actual instability of the sponsoring employer could result in some members looking to transfer their benefits to another scheme, and this might increase their vulnerability to scams. Trustees can look to counter this by trying to ensure that schemes stay in regular contact with their members, allaying fears where possible and reminding them to be wary of scams. And the specific nature of what is communicated is going to vary from scheme to scheme, but trustees might want to confirm that benefits will still be paid, even if there's going to be delay. They might remind members to complete their expression of wish forms, and also tell members about general steps that are being taken by the scheme or the employer in the current circumstances of COVID-19. Trustees should also be aware that statutory requirements in respect of communications continue to be actioned. The regulator has said that it will take a fair and proportionate approach to enforcement, and that it won't take any action against trustees who suspend the quotation and payment of statutory transfers at the moment. it is still important that member choices, including investment switches and transfers, continue to be actioned promptly, so to avoid claims that members have suffered financial loss through delay. Another financial consideration is the impact on investments, which Beth is going to talk about now.
The market volatility which has followed COVID-19 will also have adverse impacts on the investment and funding strategies of many schemes. Trustees of defined benefit schemes should consider with their investment advisors whether there is any action required in the short term. For example, should planned investment changes or de-risking exercises go ahead, as well as, in the longer term, how the funding journey plan is affected and whether strategy changes are needed. Trustees of defined contribution schemes should consider whether there is anything additional that they should communicate to members about the situation. Finally, Jessica is going to talk to you about the position of the sponsoring employer during this time and how it could impact the pension scheme.
So we know that all sectors are being impacted in some way as a result of COVID-19. Trustees need to be proactive and be contacting their sponsoring employers in order to understand what those impacts might be, what the business's contingency plans are, and what the risks that the business might face in the short, medium, and long term. Some of the things that the sponsoring employer might be looking to do include changing the employee salary arrangements, for example, and this might have an impact on employee contributions due to this scheme. They might ask the trustees for a contributions holiday, and the regulator has said that trustees should generally agree to those requests to suspend contributions as long as certain conditions are met. The sponsoring employer might well be looking to borrow more money, perhaps on more onerous terms or more expensive terms, or to increase its existing and approved debt levels. Alternatively, they might be looking to move their borrowing to a secured basis. In addition, lots of sponsoring employers are considering whether they need to restructure their balance sheets or operations, and this might be done urgently in order to avoid facing imminent insolvency. So trustees need to be able to consider and respond to these requests when they're made, but also work with covenant advisors and the sponsoring employer to really understand what the impact of COVID-19 will be on the employer's business and on the scheme, including what measures are being taken to protect the business, what the implications may be on scheme funding and members' benefits.
In these uncertain times, what is clear most of all is that there will be a need for a joined up and holistic approach to these issues that pension schemes may be facing. This means trustees, employers, other stakeholders all working together with their advisors to mitigate any impact on the pension scheme and the delivery of members' benefits. To finish on a more light-hearted note, and inspired by those of you who have contacted me to comment on my favourite movie, I will finish by thanking Jessica for joining us and asking her to share with us what her favourite TV show is. So Jessica, what is your TV show of choice at the moment?
Well, ironically and appropriately, perhaps, particularly for an insolvency lawyer, my favourite TV programme is The Walking Dead, which, as many of you will know, is a post-apocalyptic programme about zombies. Now, interestingly as well, the final episode in the current series has been delayed by COVID-19, so there's another of the impacts that this virus has had. But yeah, I recommend it. It's fantastic.
Well, that is very appropriate, actually, Jessica. As an insolvency lawyer, you could say you're like the police officer searching for the safe and secure home after the apocalypse.
I like to think so.
Being in lockdown has led me to watch TV shows that I wouldn't normally have considered. And at the moment, I'm watching one called Heartstrings. It's have you heard of it?
I haven't.
So it's by Dolly Parton, but it's quite kind of one of those Sunday afternoon movies where there's always a kind of happy ending and everyone's all nice to each other. So very appropriate in these current times, I think.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of Dolly Parton, so I'll have to look that up.
So thank you very much for joining us today, Jessica. It's been great to have you.
Before you push stop, just a quick reminder that the time spent listening to these episodes can count towards solicitors' continuing competence and PMI CPD requirements. All the episodes are available on our Mayor Brown YouTube channel, as well as iTunes, Google Play and Yahoo. You can also subscribe to this channel so that new episodes are shown automatically in the subscriptions feed. Thank you for listening and stay safe.